This video demonstrates the data visualization tool integrated into DataLink Viewer 2011. I'll start this sample report. It's just a tabular display of all line items, including various attributes such as order date, customer, salesperson, and product attributes, and some measures. Some of those measures are raw data from the database, such as quantity. Some of them are formulas, crystal formulas that return the total value, unit price times quantity, how many quarters between the minimum order date for the customer and this order date, giving me a sense of the customer vintage at that point, lead time, which is the difference between order date and required date, and things such as discount dollars and discount percent. This button launches the data visualizer. After clicking the button, the data visualization tool loads and reflects the structure of the dataset from the report in the left-hand panels. Anything that is numeric becomes a measure. Anything that is non-numeric becomes either an attribute or a date hierarchy. On the right-hand side, you see the first saved layout for this particular report, but we can access other saved layouts using this drop-down. And I'm going to move between them just to display various types of layouts. Going back to the first layout, comparing for each customer the sum of revenue and the sum of dollar discount that customer received. Makes sense to look at those types of dynamics by salesperson. So because of that, the employee last name, that's the salesperson, was dragged into the pages shelf, causing this control to appear. This allows us to either drop the drop down and jump to another salesperson. We can also simply drag this handle to move between the different salespeople. And particularly in cases where we're paging by date, such as by month or quarter or year, frequently it makes sense to set these types of displays to animation so we can automatically scroll between the various possible items, and we can control the speed of the animation by clicking these buttons. The trend line that you see here was turned on by clicking on this option, and we can control the settings for the trend lines using this dialog. Currently it's polynomial degree 2, so it's quadratic trend line that gets fitted through these points. I can shift to linear, and I can change my mind by clicking the undo button, or if I hit the F1 button, you can see that undo is Control Z and redo is Control Y. So if I hit Control Z right now, we go back to quadratic. If I hit Control Y, it goes back to linear. I'm going to go back to quadratic, and we expect the relationship to be such that customers that generate a lot of revenue for us should also receive a lot of discount. As we can see, that is not always the case, and in fact for different employees we can see that the relationship tends to change. Let's look at Peacock. We have clearly an exception point here. This happens to be Sporting Wheels, and we can click on that spot and select that customer, right click and select View Underlying Data, and then pop up a display of all the detail rows that make up that particular data point. We can then select all of that, copy it to a clipboard, and copy that to Excel for further analysis. We can also select multiple points. So for example, in these two cases, I'm going to lasso them. Now that they're both selected, I can right click and select View Underlying Data, and I can see all the data points that make up those dots. Notice that the dots reflect not just the level of revenue and discount, but they also reflect two other measures. The color reflects the experience level, or how many quarters on average that customer has been with us. We can see under measures that while revenue, if I right click and select aggregate function, it is summed, but customer quarters, if I right click, the aggregate function there was set up to average. And so using color, and all you need to do to achieve that is you just drag the customer quarters measure into this color shelf. So you can see that in the size shelf I have the order details.quantity, and because of that, as the quantity generated by the customer goes bigger, the dot becomes bigger. The discount was filtered by right clicking the discount. You can also turn on the Show Quick Filter. This was done, and because of that you can see this filter dialog here, and that allows you to drag this scroller to either increase the filter, make it more extreme, or reduce it. If I go back all the way to 0, I will see a lot more customers. I can go into that shelf, type in 50, hit enter, and get the scroller to a precise point. Let's recreate the same visualization from scratch. I'll click the Clear Layout button, drag the revenue measure into the columns shelf, the discount measure into the rows shelf, the customer name into the levels of detail, so we get a dot for each customer in the scatter plot, the employee last name, that's the sales rep, into the pages shelf, that gives us the control that allows us to jump between different employees. I'll control the size of the dot using the quantity measure, so I'll drag that into the size shelf. I'm going to edit the sizes to make them a little bit less extreme, both at the high end as well as at the low end. I'll hide the size shelf. Next, I'll control the color of the dots. That's based on the customer quarters, so I'll drag that into the color shelf. I'm going to change the color scheme, so at the high end I want to use dark green, and at the low end I'll use a light gray, and I'll change the shape of the dots to a solid circle. The list of employees here is alphabetic. I want them to be listed from highest average percent discount to lowest. And to achieve that, I can simply right-click the employee last name and select Sort, more sort options, descending by discount. So now you can see that the list of employees is same as before, and you can also see there's a little sort icon reflecting the fact that the employee last name dimension has been sorted. I want to also filter, so right-clicking the discount measure, show quick filter, and we get this little control that allows us to select what is the lowest or highest level of discount that is going to be acceptable. I'm going to type a value in there to make it precise. Let's add trend lines, so I just right-click, select show trend lines, and I don't want it to be linear, so right-click, trend line options, polynomial degree 2, and now we're back to an identical display just like we had before. I can save that, and I'll call this recreate vis 1. We are on visualization 1 out of 7. As I click OK, this is going to be saved as visualization 8 out of 8, and it is listed here at the bottom of the drop-down. Let's review the second visualization. This shows revenue by customer vintage. For example, this particular area shows that 3 quarters after an initial purchase by a customer, we tend to have a peak of additional revenue. This means that we may want to target customers 3 quarters after their initial purchase for further marketing offers. The display was created by placing customer quarters in the columns, or the x-axis, and revenue in the rows shelf, or the y-axis. The dots were colored by percent discount. There was a paging by product type, so we can move between different product types to see different behaviors. For example, hybrid doesn't have those peaks in the second, third, and seventh quarters, while competition has distinct peaks in those areas. The drop-down shows only 3 product types. We sorted the product types descending by revenue, and we're showing only certain product class. I'm going to show the quick filter, and you can see that accessory is not shown. And if I go and quick filter on product type, it replaces the prior quick filter because only one quick filter is visible on the report layout at any time. And you can see that the reason we had only 3 product types in the drop down there is because we turned on only these particular 3 product types: competition, hybrid, and mountain. If I turned on another bicycle like kids, then at this point the drop down will reflect that, and I will have kids as an available option. If I turn that off, the drop down reflects the fact that it's no longer valid. This is an example of bringing in some insight into the data set. It required creating a formula computing customer quarters to support analysis by customer vintage. And that's where the power of Crystal and data visualization combines. As a Crystal report developer, you know how to create formulas and you have the insight into the business metrics that are of interest. Once you create a data set with Crystal and take care of the table joins and the formulas, the data visualization tool then allows the managers or the analysts to interact with the data in insightful ways. Let's look at a few other features in the context of the next visualization. This is a line chart. The color reflects average % discount, so we can conclude that for leveling, while that salesperson had a relatively minor decline in revenue, it was done at the expense of providing higher discounts to the customers. The thickness of the line reflects average lead time, the difference between order date and required date. So anytime we see a salesperson that allowed that thickness to become very narrow, we know that that was placing us in danger of shipping orders late. In the columns shelf, this is an example of placing a date field, and in particular a date hierarchy. As you can see, under order date, by default we have year, quarter, month, and day, and as we drag the order date hierarchy into the column shelf, it starts by showing just the year. So we can see a trend line here by year of revenue, and the panels are the salespeople. The hierarchy allows us to very easily expand to show all quarters and then expand further to show all months. If we do this, by the way, notice that we now have to scroll to see the full display, or we can right-click and select continuous. I'm going to do Control-Z. We can also drill down into the hierarchy levels more selectively. So notice that the quarters here at the bottom have a plus sign, and I can expand just 2004 to show the quarters. And I can expand a particular quarter, for example, for 2005. Let's expand the first quarter, and now I see just the months for that particular quarter. As you build layouts, the visualizer guesses quite intelligently at the proper chart type. In this case, because a date field was involved, a line chart was automatically picked, but you're free to override and change the chart types manually. You can use this button to copy, or if I hit the F1, I see a reminder that Control-C allows me to copy the display to the clipboard. I can bring up another application, and Control-V pastes the display. You can also export the display. This button provides several export options. The PDF option allows us to specify what is included in the export, the location and sort order for the legend, page setup options, as well as some document properties. As we work with a visualizer, all the layouts associated with one RPT are stored in a single file. I'm going to hit F1. The visualization file, the DLVV file associated with this report, is stored in the same folder as this RPT file. This means that all I need to do to deliver both the report and the layouts to any user is to place the DLVV file in the same folder as the RPT file. If I need to place them in a separate location, the options dialog allows me to specify an alternative file location for visualization layouts. Also, the Launch tab allows me to specify a visualization action. So if an RPT file gets loaded into DataLink Viewer and a DLVV file is found for that RPT file, I can elect to either bring up the report, and in that case the user would have to click the visualizer button to bring up the layouts, or the visualizations would load automatically and either keep the preview of the report, minimize the preview, or completely hide the preview. The last option is probably useful for cases where you need to deploy visualization layouts to some executives and you don't want them to even see the Crystal report. They just need to interact with the visualizer. When I click on this package button to package the RPT to an RPZ file, I can specify that I want to embed the DLVV file inside the RPZ file. And if you do that, you end up with an RPZ file, a single file that contains both the RPT as well as all the layouts. In that case, all you need to deliver to the user is the RPZ file. Here's an example of an RPZ that was loaded into the visualizer. All the embedded visualizations inside that RPZ are listed here at the top, enclosed in curly brackets. That's an indication that they're protected. The user cannot delete or reorder them. But the user is free to use them as a basis for creating their own visualizations, saving them to new names, and reordering and deleting those user-based visualizations, which are not enclosed in curly brackets. Overall, this creates a mechanism for you as a consultant or report developer whereby you can create carefully designed visualizations that the user can then use as a basis without risking deleting or harming those pre-designed visualizations. In this display right now, this layout is the third one, and I can see that it says 3 out of 8 here. Hitting the F1 button provides a reminder that I can shift the ordering of the layouts. So Control-Shift up moves the layout up, Control-Shift down moves it down. So if I do Control-Shift up arrow, this layout just moved to the second position, and you can see it's also reflected here, 2 out of 8. If I do Control-Shift down, it just got moved to the third position, 3 out of 8. Other options that are provided through the F1 reminders here: I can print, I can save a layout to a new name, I can save a layout to the last loaded name. So if I made some changes and I want to just save the updated layout under the same name, I can do Control-Shift-S. If I want to delete a layout, I can do Control-Shift-X. It will be removed from this drop-down and from the visualization file. Let's move to the next visualization. And in this case, one unique feature is the ability to generate multiple trend lines for different subpopulations of the data. Each one of these trend lines is for a different sales rep. And what we see is the relationship between average lead time and average percent late for the orders generated by these sales reps. The level of detail is year, month, and week. So, for example, this particular dot for Suyama shows the set of all line items generated in a given year, month, and week. And we can see that on average, the average lead time was 3 days and percent late was 60%. So we can see that certain employees, so for example in this case these two sales reps, Leverling and Suyama, have a relatively flat trend line, meaning as they accept orders with shorter lead times, they're still able to provide the same level of late deliveries. While for other employees, for example the red line belongs to King, as lead time goes shorter, their orders tend to get delivered late. So we can focus on those employees and ask them why did they accept particular orders, knowing that the lead time perhaps was too short. And I can select some of those subpopulations, and as always I can right click and view the underlying data to drill down into the detail. So what controls the ability to create multiple trend lines? That's simply a function of trend line options, and by default there's an option here that says allow a trend line per color, and because color is dictated by employee, that's the behavior that we're seeing. I'd like to build this visualization with you from scratch so you can see how easy it is. I'll click the clear layout, drag lead time into the columns shelf, percent late into the rows shelf, year, month, and week into the levels of detail. I'll page the display by product type, but in this control I don't want them to be sorted alphabetically, so I'll sort them by revenue, descending by revenue. I'm going to color the dots and break the displays so that each employee gets their own dots by dragging the employee last name into the color shelf. I'll change the shape to a solid circle, and I'll control the size of each dot by revenue. Editing the sizes allows me to reduce extremes, and I'll turn on trend lines, and you can see by default I get a separate trend line per color, so each employee, each salesperson gets their own regression line. I'd like to sort the employees here, instead of alphabetically, by percent late. So I'll right click the employee in the color shelf, and under sort the employees descending by percent late. I can see in the display here that above lead times of about 10 or 9 I don't get any percent lates, so I'll filter lead time by doing a show quick filter and drag to about 9, and that gets me a display that is more interesting. I'll hide this card to maximize the use of the screen real estate. I'll save this display. I'll call this recreate Viz4, click OK, and now I can see that I'm on visualization 9 out of 9, and recreate Viz4 is available to me here. Just as a reminder, because I'm paging by product type, I can see different dynamics for different product types. Here's an example of a crosstab layout. Employee last name is used as columns, product type name as rows. The text dictated by the label shelf here is the revenue. The color of the text is controlled by % discount, so cells that are red are highlighting cases with high % discount. I could even drag another measure into the size shelf and control the sizing of the font using another measure. You can control various style attributes such as header, data cell, and total format using this drop-down. You can also control the totals display using these options under this drop-down. If I want to maximize the use of the screen real estate, I can toggle the schema on the left-hand side, and I can also remove all the shelves, all the cards that you see here and the shelves at the top. So a click on that option would really clean up the display. I'm going to bring those things back. If you save a layout, the state, the hidden or visible state of all these elements on the screen is remembered. This visualization is filtered on the year dimension to just 2004. We see 4 quarters for each combination of product type and salesperson, and the height of the bar reflects revenue. The color of the bar reflects % discount, so those bars that are reddish show hotspots of high discounts. Instead of just sorting product types by revenue, I'd like to just show the top 3. And to do that, I can just right-click, select Filter, Value Filter, Top N, select the top count of revenue, 3 to show top 3. And now the display shows the top 3 product types on revenue. Another interesting maneuver would be to take customer quarters or some other measures and drop them on the size shelf. Now the thicker bars reflect customers that have been with us for more quarters. And an interesting insight that comes out of this is that we tend to sell more to new customers in the first 2 quarters, and then in the last 2 quarters that we tend to sell more to older customers. DataLink Viewer allows you to specify custom hierarchies for the data in your reports. In our case, we created 2 custom hierarchies, one called product hierarchy and one for market, allowing us to create expand and collapse and selective drill down paths for our data. We're showing the top 3 countries by revenue, and I can expand USA to show cities, and within cities I can expand to see individual customers, and then I can collapse it back. In the product hierarchy, I can collapse bicycles, or I can expand, and under product type I can expand competition and show the individual products within competition. Let's see how these custom hierarchies are defined. I switched back to the preview of the report. If you remember, we launched the visualizer from the Data Visualizer button. And I'll go into the version info button and double click this text area at the bottom to open up the location of datalinkviewer.ini. And I'll open the ini file in Notepad. And this is the section in the ini file that controls custom hierarchies. Top nodes declares what hierarchies are defined. There's one for product class and one for customer country as the top nodes. The product class is then defined as a hierarchy named product hierarchy with this column at the top and providing user-friendly names for the different levels in the hierarchies. Similarly, customer country was defined as a hierarchy named market, and the levels are country, city, and customer. Going back to the display, this allows you to support data exploration that is aware of the way you think about your business. I hope you enjoyed this video demo. To summarize, DataLink Viewer can now load data from any Crystal report into its integrated data visualization tool. Users can then display, explore, and drill down into the data in unique and useful ways. Consultants and power users can create and save visualization layouts for easy use by other managers.